The early 2000s, a time when the world still felt a little simpler, but the weight of dreams and desires was no less heavy. The streets of the small, crumbling town were often damp from the evening rains, and the scent of old concrete mixed with the distant hum of the nearby highway. For 28-year-old Ethan, life had always been a grind, pushing through dead-end jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, and hoping that someday his luck would change. He worked at a car repair shop, fixing engines and changing tires, and when he wasn't doing that, he was fixing the ones he loved. His girlfriend, Emma, was the light in his otherwise dreary world. Emma had been the one person who seemed to see past his worn-out clothes and messy apartment. They had met back in high school. She was the girl with the bright smile and the big dreams, always talking about one day living in a beautiful house with white picket fences and getting away from the humdrum of small-town life. Ethan wasn't much of a dreamer. His dreams were more practical: get a decent job, pay the bills, and one day, maybe save enough to move to a better place. But Emma had always wanted more. And for a while, he thought they could build that more together. But sometimes, the world doesn't play fair. It was a Friday night when everything changed. Ethan was working the late shift at the shop, his hands slick with grease, the hum of the fluorescent lights above buzzing in his ears. He had been texting Emma all day. She had promised she would meet him at the diner after he got off work. He was excited to see her. He hadn't seen her much lately, and they hadn't had the time to talk. They hadn't had the time to feel like a couple in weeks, and Ethan was itching to get some normalcy back. His phone buzzed again as he wiped his hands on his overalls. It was a text from Emma. "Can't make it tonight, babe." Something came up. He frowned, his heart sinking a little. He hadn't heard from her much that week, but this wasn't like her. She never cancelled last minute. "Are you okay?" he texted back, his fingers itching to dial her number. No response. For a moment, he felt something stirring in his gut, an unease, a sense of being left out, a flicker of doubt. But he shrugged it off. Emma was busy. She had things to do, right? She wasn't going to leave him. The next day, Ethan found himself sitting on the couch of his small, dimly lit apartment, watching the rain fall against the windows. His phone buzzed again, but this time, it was a call from his best friend, Mark. They had grown up together, done everything together, and had been through more than a few misadventures in their time. But Mark's voice on the other end was different this time. Lower, quieter. "Hey, man," Mark said, I hate to tell you this, but you need to know. I saw Emma last night." Ethan's pulse quickened. His stomach twisted into knots. "What do you mean? You saw her? What's going on?" Mark paused, a long silence that stretched between them like a heavy fog. Then, his words came out in a rush. "She was with someone else. A guy. A rich guy. He drove a black Porsche, and they were all over each other, Ethan." The world around Ethan seemed to freeze. The sound of the rain against the window became a distant hum, and his breath caught in his throat. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you deserve to know," Mark said, his voice laced with genuine regret. Ethan couldn't speak. The image of Emma, his Emma, climbing into a stranger's car, the warmth and trust he thought they had, it all seemed like a cruel joke now. But a part of him refused to believe it. Emma wouldn't do that. She couldn't. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief. Ethan tried calling Emma repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He showed up at her apartment, only to find her car missing, the door locked, and the place strangely empty. It was as though she had disappeared, leaving behind only the faint traces of what was once real. Finally, on the fourth day, Emma called. "Hey, Ethan," she said, her voice flat, distant. "I think we need to talk." The words hit him like a ton of bricks. He agreed to meet her at the same diner they had promised to visit the week before, the same place where they had shared so many memories. When Emma walked in, she was dressed in a sleek, tight black dress that didn't match the girl Ethan once knew. Her hair was done up in loose curls, and she looked different. Something about her was off, like she was playing a part in someone else's script. "Sit down," she said, her tone strangely cool. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "What's going on, Emma? Why haven't you been answering me? Why are you avoiding me?" She looked down at her hands, twirling her coffee cup idly. Ethan, I don't know how to say this. There's someone else. His heart dropped. The word seemed to echo through his skull like a cruel drumbeat. His name is Derek. He's rich. He has money, a house in the city, all the things I've always dreamed of. Things I want. I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending with you. I need more than this. I deserve more than this. Ethan stared at her in stunned silence. The woman he had loved, the woman who had told him they'd build a life together, was now sitting across from him, telling him that he wasn't enough. He wasn't enough because he couldn't give her the life she wanted. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was just indifferent. Are you happy with him? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his throat tight. Mia looked away. Yes, I am. The years that followed felt like a blur to Ethan. The pain of losing Mia was almost unbearable, but with time, he found the strength to move on. He threw himself into his work, fixing cars until his hands bled, until the weight of his heartache faded into something more manageable. Mia and Derek? They moved to the city, and Mia's dreams of a lavish life came true, just like she'd always wanted. But Ethan never forgot how quickly she turned her back on him, how easily she'd traded love for luxury. One rainy night, a few years later, Ethan saw her again. He was walking home from work when he spotted her driving in a black Porsche, the same car Mark had described. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment as she passed by, and for just a second, the world paused. She didn't recognize him at first, and he didn't care enough to call out. Ethan knew that, in the end, the cost of her dream was the price of his heart. And that, for all the riches and luxuries in the world, was something he would never buy back. But as he walked away, the sound of his own footsteps in the rain felt oddly comforting.